Welcome to the Vigor Life Podcast, a source of inspiration, lessons, stories, skill sets, mindsets, and strategies to invigorate and expand all areas of your life. Let's go. What is going on? Coach Luka back here with the Vigor Ground. Whoa, I said Vigor Ground, the Vigor Life Podcast. See, I'm so into the gym right now that I can't even say different words. But hey, we're back here. This is kind of a I would say a second edition of the nutrition part of the nutrition podcast, but we're going to touch on a couple of factors because this is honestly kind of like why fitness and nutrition are failing us. It's a bunch of studies on what's really going on, and we're just going to dive deep into I would say some more data and research and how to actually apply and change this into your own life so that you see changes and you see differences. I've talked about a bunch of things quite a lot when it comes to nutrition as far as habits, environments, just like that. We're going to touch on those a little bit more today, but I don't know if a lot of people know the data that I'm going to go through. A lot of this actually is also I would say Joel Jameson talks about a lot about it, which by the way you should if you haven't done his Bioforce conditioning course, definitely do that because it's a lot more than a conditioning course. But with that said, like this information certainly has to get out there because I was speaking at a WarriorCon last year in front of I think it's about 650, 700 guys, talking about this, and I had so many people come up to me afterwards and email me afterwards, like because they were like, man, I didn't know that. Like that presentation was like really eye-opening, and part of the reason was because when you get, I would say, hundreds of A-type guys into a room, that want to change their body and the way they feel, and they want to create power, and they want to feel healthy again and move better and be conditioned and strong and all that, right? And there's that A-typeness behind that. The last thing that you want to hear that they're doing too much. Now, I also like my own personal life is a pure experience of doing too much. I mean, my whole life, like I'm doing too much, right? And I'll share a little bit of my story of how this comes in as far as, I didn't sleep a lot and now I sleep a lot more. Still probably not optimal, but definitely a lot more. I fixed that. It fixed a lot of my I would say health issues that were kind of like popping up. But I want to touch base on like what most people don't know and kind of like, hey, why fitness is failing us, because you'll see a lot of conversation, in the U.S. It's like, man, like people aren't, training a lot. They're not training enough. There's, it's laziness. It's this, that, and the other. And I'd have you consider that that's not really true. Americans are very, very, very active. And when you look at the stats, I think I've mentioned this before, is that, from 2000 to 2016, you're looking at an increase of, if I'm not mistaken, like 65% in gym memberships. And, now if I gave you that statistic straight up, you'd be like, geez, man, that's phenomenal. That's fantastic. Millions and millions and millions of people are basically members of a gym now, over the course of the last 16 years. This is a great statistic. Statistic number 2 is that between 1988 and 2006, the frequency of leisure time physical activity increased from 47 to 120%. Like, that's how much it increased. Now, what is the thing? For women, it more than doubled their frequency of exercise, while men up theirs by nearly 50%. So think about that. So this is a span of 20 years. And I would say that since 2006, that number's gone up. I know it's gone up. I don't know the exact data and statistics behind that, but it has. So there we go. We got a second statistic that's like, wow, this is really positive, right? We got 65% more people going to the gym. Women doubled their frequency of exercise, and men increased it by 50%. Man, we're on the right track. We're on the right track, right? But if we look at obesity rates from 97 to 2015, they've gone up more than 12%. And like I said, this is 2015. If we look at 2018, it's gone up even more. So since 97 to 2015, they went up from 19.4% to 30.4%. Like I said, I think right now they're at like 33 or more. It's compounding, right? So now you look at that and you go, like, hold on. So people are joining gyms more. they're training more frequently, and yet obesity rates are going up. The other thing that's happening too is people with diabetes, age 35 or older, with self-reported heart disease or stroke has gone up, right? So we're looking at basically obesity has gone up, health has gone down, right? And we could look into other numbers that like basically track health, different markers of health, and you'd see that they've gone down. So you go like, what figures? I mean, we have more information than we've ever had about nutrition, about fitness, about, you know, what works, the science of what doesn't work, what works. We have more information about, you know, behavior change and these, you know, I would say things around that, which I don't think is out there enough. But nonetheless, right? More information than ever, more gyms than ever, more diet books than ever, more everything than ever, and yet horribly, miserably failing on the end of helping people get healthier. Now, once again, I've talked about this, right? As far as like what I believe the future of fitness is and like what's going on. But a lot of the research, and this is not the only one thing that's the problem. But since I've talked about nutrition and environments and behavior change, I'm going to touch a little bit more on, you know, what the problem is. And a lot of the problem is, and it's the same thing that I talked to that group of men at WarriorCon was, you know, more is not always better. And like, here's another study is, you know, where they were testing control groups versus groups that were expanding a certain amount of exercise in basically energy, and then seeing what type of weight loss they had. So for a group that was expanding, and it was basically you had a predicted weight loss and actual weight loss, right? And this is like 4 kilowatts of the exercise dose. Basically, they're doing it in energy doses, right? Like how hard they're working based on energy. And when they were working at 4 kilowatts, like they had a predicted weight loss of 1.0, but they lost 1.4. So that was great, okay? When they doubled the energy expenditure, right? So you work twice as hard. Now the weight loss, it still went up, but the percentage dropped. So they were expecting 2.0, they got 2.1. But then when you went to 12 kilowatts, now the weight loss actually dropped to 1.5, meaning that like when you work 3 times as hard as the initial group, your results were exactly the same. And the more you expanded, the less results you got. Now, why is that? Well, I mean, it's one of those, you know, one of them is like the oh duh moment, right? Where you can't just keep training harder and harder and harder and seeing better results. And it's like, absolutely. Now, the thing is, the factors of, you know, how you basically get results is a lot of it is based around recovery, right? I always talk about there's a stimulus and then there's recovery, right? And the recovery time is where you get the results. And so now we know, right? If you train more, it doesn't mean that you're going to get better results. And you look at activity levels, right? Because then people will be like, oh, it's activity. But when you look at the comparison, there's data in the comparison between US, Norway, and Japan. And obviously that's just the countries that they chose. But where in the US, activity levels are, you know, 40, let's see, because this chart is a little bit crazy. But let's just put it this way, that Japan has the lowest activity levels, and it has also the lowest obesity. They only have 5% obesity. America has massively higher activity levels than Japan, and yet it has 33% obesity, right? So we're looking at like 6 to 7 times higher obesity, but activity level was like a lot higher. I would say almost double, right? So it's not that. And then so we go to that and we ask, okay, well, what's going on with, if the Fitbit is telling us that like, man, we're burning this many calories, we should be eating this many calories and so on and so forth. Well, we also know now studies that show that there's a finite amount of metabolism, right? Meaning you don't burn calories till, you know, land's end. So, and if I'm not mistaken, I may be a little bit off by the numbers here, but like most people can exert, I think it's on average like 7,000 something calories per day, right? So it doesn't go on forever. So if you do 10,000 steps per day, it doesn't mean that 20,000 steps is going to be better, or that you're going to burn the same amount of calories as you did for 10,000. Remember, become more efficient, right? Energy gets distributed in different ways. So even though, you're training for 6 hours a day, that doesn't mean that you're going to burn that amount of calories. We just talked about that study that showed the more expenditure and also the duration, there's a limit to this. And so there was actually and Joe was telling me and explaining this, that they did studies on a tribe that did, on average, I don't know how many miles a day, like 10, 12, something like that, miles a day, that they were walking that much or even running or whatnot. But they weren't burning any more calories than the average human was. It's just their body was distributing that energy differently, right? So it was making their bodies more efficient. And so there's a finite amount to metabolism. Now, once you understand that, it means that there's only so much you can do, and it's going to distribute it in different ways. And from there, you start understanding that it's all about energy, right? When we train, you disrupt homeostasis, which is basically where the body wants to be, right? Where your blood pressure is a certain way, your breathing, your oxygen, all these different ways, right? When I do something, if I don't know, start doing hundreds of push-ups right now, I'm going to disrupt that homeostasis, right? Things are not, my body's going to have to change things to keep me, work to keep me in homeostasis. And that's called allostasis, right? But from there, because of that homeostasis disrupted, there's mechanical and metabolic sensors that are triggered, right? So these are the adaptations that start happening in the body. There's a specific gene expression. We talked about I would say epigenetics and what happens, how our genes express based on, turn on and off based on our environments, everything from training to food to you name it, right? And then from there, when you have recovery and adaptation, there's structural and functional neuromuscular adaptations, right? Remember, when there's recovery and adaptation, that's where these changes happen. And the reality is, it's like having money, right? I remember my pops would, he'd give me money when I was younger, and it was like an allowance if I, did the right things and I did the work and, worked in the garden and whatnot, right? But you have allowance, and then you only got so much money that you can spend, right? And if you're going to put some money towards groceries and some money towards that and going out and whatever, right? And the money's gone. Once the money's gone, that's it. There is no more money, And that is the way the energy works, right? You only have a finite amount of energy to distribute, period, no matter what, no matter how much you're training, okay? And now it's okay, where do I put this? Where do I put this money, right? Where do I put this energy? And so the way that the brain controls energy, first of all, is by importance. And just so we understand, right? The brain controls all the energy. And what's most important is the vital biological functions for RMR. So that's our resting metabolic rate. Everything from our heart, our lungs, our reproductive organs, everything that for me to just sit here and do nothing, right? To just live and breathe, right? That's what energy goes first, because that's vital. That's, without that, we're not living. And remember, the brain doesn't give a shit about you having a six-pack, doesn't care about you being jacked. It cares about survival, right? So that's where the energy goes first. Then second, the energy goes towards physical activity and then stress. So if I'm picking this stuff up, I'm carrying my bag, I'm walking around, I'm moving, right? I'm talking with my hands, which I like to do like my mom does. That's the activity. Now, if I start training, guess what? More physical activity exerted. And one of the big things that the energy goes towards is stress, right? You guys might have heard that our brain weighs about 2 pounds, but it uses up about 25% of all the body's glycogen, right? That's a lot of glycogen used for that little brain, but that's because that's how much it needs, okay? So when you're really stressed out and we're in a sympathetic state, that's using up a lot of energy, okay? So we just talked about, right, that we're active. As a country, we're very active, more active than just about, if not every other country. And gym activity has gone up, physical activity has gone up, all these things have gone up, but we haven't got the results that we want, right? And this is an explanation of it, because if all the brain gives energy to your vital functions first, and then it gives it to training, movement, activity, exercise, and stress, only last does it have, I would say, the energy to allocate to tissue recovery and adaptation, right? Which is your fitness, right? Which is the changes you usually want to see: building muscle, maintaining muscle, dropping body fat, neurological adaptations, right? Getting stronger, improving performance. So if you only have a finite amount of energy to allocate and you use it all up through obviously RMR, which you can control if you improve your health and whatnot, but because you're putting so much into physical activity and you don't have enough recovery, because what is recovery? I mean, recovery is everything from sleep to nutrition to dropping down your stress levels, right? Only there we see the adaptations. That's why so many, when I would train high level, everything from I would say athletes or even stressed out college athletes, but certainly, CEOs, entrepreneurs, things of that nature, where they're coming in, doing 14-hour days. They got a family, and they're not getting a lot of sleep. But they're A-type and they want to start training 4 or 5 days a week really hard and then doing other activities and playing squash and, basketball over the weekends and whatnot, and they're stuck and not getting results. And more than anything, they're actually starting to get beat up and seeing injuries and things like that. Well, that's why, right? That's the body's way of saying hey, listen, your tissues they're reaching threshold. There's not enough recovery. There's too much stimulus, not enough recovery, and you're not going to get results. So this is the reason, right? When you start understanding that brain controls energy, and you see where it's allocating it, now it's you can start looking at man, am I putting, how much recovery am I getting? How much am I putting towards quality nutrition? Or, like I said, before you do anything else, right? Before you do anything else, it's fix your sleep. And, I've done a whole podcast on sleep. I've talked about sleep in the past, my journey on fixing my sleep that took about 1.5 years. And I can say that majority of the nights now I do sleep 7, maybe even 8. There's days where I do less, but it's gotten so much better, and literally it was almost getting a new lease on life, because I was, in my mind, I was crazy hustling, training hard, whatnot. I didn't even know what it feels like to be fresh. And we'll touch on this in a second, actually. Me and Gene were just talking about Joe Rogan podcast. We had Matthew Clark, the author of Why We Dream, on there. Walker, appreciate it. Walker in the book Why We Dream, and so many studies associated with even an hour or 2 hours less of sleep than you need, what happens to your health. The increases in you getting cancer, getting Alzheimer's, and one actually just the study that I remember we talked about, whether it's this is very precise, you can look it up, but that in I think in one town or one city where they changed the school starting, instead of at 8 a.m. they moved it to 9:30, and how much that the traffic accidents in that city dropped by 75% because the kids were so much more rested when they were driving. Because it's if you're underslept by 2 hours, it's literally driving around with having 0.04 alcohol in your system, right? It's being drunk all the time. And looking back is even though I know the statistical data, I know it's easy to get used to living like that, right? What I mean by that is that I was in a phase where, I was sleeping very little for many, many, many years. We're talking about, 3 to 4 hours a night, just horrible, right? And I could deal with it, but that doesn't mean my life was optimal. Actually, I just kept churning away until I hit threshold and then had a bunch of adrenal issues, hormonal issues, all these different things, right? But because you're so used to it, it becomes normal, right? And it's not natural, but it just becomes normal. And I would say a lot of things in life are like that. We get clients in, it's I see them moving their shoulder, and it's hey, what's going on? It's my shoulder. It's what's up with it? Nothing, I'm used to it. Right? They're used to the nagging pain. It becomes, your low back is tight, your hips are bugging you. You're used to it. That's not natural, right? It just becomes normal. And I would have you consider that those are the things that are signs that your body's breaking down, right? You're reaching your tissue thresholds. Like I said, your environment of everything that you do, both from recovery to food to training to stimulus to, like I said, recovery sessions, all these different things are not allowing you to be at your best, and probably not gain strength, not build muscle, not lose body fat. And this brings me to, stress. And once again, if you're not sleeping enough, guess what? That means your cortisol is probably higher, which means your stress is higher. And it's like this self-fulfilling prophecy, right? More cortisol prevents you from sleeping well. Less sleep means more cortisol. And so here we go. And then there's all these studies obviously around like people that sleep less, eating more. And, that's actually been one of the most connected, I would say, studies when it comes to, obesity with kids, is that the kids on average sleep less than they used to. And it's gone up with the obesity in kids. But to bring it back to like all of those things are stress. So the stress of life, and you can see basically there's just one specific study that shows a couple of different things. A group that was stressed, like higher stress and lower stress, right? And so a lower stress group, and they were measuring both arm size, 1 rep max back squat, and 1 rep max bench press. So the strength gains after resistance training, so the effects of stress and negative life events. And you can see, significantly, we're talking about, 10, 15, 20% lower, I would say, gains in strength on, and these are short, like these are very, very short. This is not like, oh, somebody was stressed for, months and months and months on end. This is like literally like short term, showing like how stress can impact you in the short term. Like you're stressed out of your mind for 2-3 days, and how that will drop your 1 rep max bench press, your squat, and so on and so forth. Another study is an effect of 1 week of sleep restriction on testosterone levels in young, healthy men. And they dropped, down up to 25, even closer to 30%, right? That's pretty crazy, right? That's one night. And I can certainly tell you that the years, especially on the back end of those years, right? Like as I went deeper into those years of not sleeping much, how it affected my testosterone, right? Where it wasn't even that I couldn't, that I wasn't strong. I couldn't demonstrate my strength, right? I couldn't demonstrate my physical abilities because, remember, fatigue masks fitness. And what's a great way to explain this? Okay, cool. Like let's say at your freshest, your best, your whatever, you can, because everybody loves bench, you can bench 300 pounds, right? But if I make you run like 6 miles at a 8:30, at an 8-minute tempo, and then go like, all right, come on, go on bench press, right? You probably had to be able to bench press max. Why? Because fatigue is masking your fitness. Now, of course, like I could give other different examples, or at the end of a really tough basketball session or a bodyweight workout, go bench press your max. You can't do it. Fatigue masks fitness. But it's the same thing as like lack of sleep. It's been shown to drop performance at crazy levels. Like, as I say, sleep is the super drug. It's the super, super supplement, whatever else you want to call it, because you'd see like even one night's sleep of like lacking 2 or 3 hours of sleep, like you're dropping your performance, 30+%. That's crazy, right? And so when you see these studies and you see the effects of stress on performance, on gains, right, it makes you start realizing like, why is fitness failing us, and what do we want to do about this, right? So, and this brings me to the nutritional component of it, and because once you can see that these are all puzzle pieces, right? Nothing ever lives in a vacuum, obviously. And usually one thing I would say drives the next one. Like lack of sleep is gonna, make you more grumpy. It's gonna make you more irritable. When you're more irritable and more emotional, guess what? We talked about the HALT strategy, right? Like, are you eating because you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? And when you're tired, or you're angry, which is usually driven by lack of sleep, because hey, nobody's, very few people are like as perky as when they get 8 hours of sleep or when they get 5. It's a big difference, right? So that drives emotional eating, right? And that creates different patterns and disorders and things of that nature. So notice how each one of these kind of like feed one another. And I've talked about this before. Is the behavior helping you live the best life and helping you achieve your goals or not, And those are pretty simple. Like, hey, is me sleeping 4.5 hours a night helping me be lean, strong, powerful, have good energy, have good relationships, wake up in the morning energized, right? Easy. No, it's not, right? Same thing as, hey, are these foods doing that for me? No, right? But we come to like one of the factors is like why getting lean is hard. This is another study, and this one I think is very important to hear, because it's some of the conversations that we're having with clients at all times. Mostly when people go like, I don't understand, Luka, why I'm not losing weight. I've been on this 1,300 calorie diet and for a while now, and I'm not losing weight. The reality is it's most likely got nothing to do with hormones. It's got nothing to do with, my metabolism is just shot completely. The majority of the time is that people are eating more. They're not aware of how much they're eating, right? They think that they're eating less than they truly are. And put it this way, they did this study where, number one, they had people estimate, how many calories. They put them through a workout, and they asked the person, like, hey, how many calories do you estimate that you burn, right? And people estimated that they burned 800 calories in that workout. I don't know how long the workout was. I think it was like 45 minutes to an hour or something like that. And then they said, okay, eat as much food as you feel that you burn, right? So first of all, they thought that they thought that they burned 800 calories. So, but the measured calories burn, right? So what they actually burned was 200. So let's get this straight. They thought they burned over 800, right? They actually burned about 200. And they consumed like a little less than 600 calories, right? Because they're like, well, eat less than what you burn, right? But they thought they burned 800, so they ate almost 600 calories. So this is the problem, right? People think that they burn more than they do, and they think that they eat less than they did, right? So these results suggest that normal weight individual overestimated, energy expenditure by 3 to 4 folds, right? 3 to 4x than what they did. Further, when asked to precisely compensate for energy expenditure with food intake, the resulting energy intake is still 2 to 3 folds greater than the measured energy expenditure, right? So this is my scientific readout of this study. But essentially what it means is like they overestimated how many calories they burned and underestimated how many calories they ate by 2 to 3 folds, right? And this is usually where things get stuck, right? Like the thought process is like, and this is where kind of like the Fitbits are wrong. And I mentioned this in one of the last podcasts that, non-pro athletes, so I would say individuals that aren't highly trained, average about 10 calories per minute in a training session at best. So at most you can expect in a really high intensity workout, you can shoot for burning about 10 calories per minute. So in a 60-minute workout, that's 600 calories, right? And I can't tell you just in the last 2 weeks, when I've had a couple people going like, oh yeah, the other day we were at this place and we did the 1,200 calorie workout, right? So essentially they're saying that they burned 1,200 calories. I said, oh, how long was that workout? And they were like, man, it was an hour. It was just, it was crazy. And I was like, okay, not likely. But once again, like that was their thought process, or because, the place said, hey, this is 1,200 calorie burn workout, right? So, but now you're misinterpreting both sides of the equation, and you wonder, why, why people are struggling with weight loss, because they're misunderstanding, I would say, overestimating and underestimating what's going on. And which brings me to, because I wanted to tap into this, right? If you guys have heard of, it's got a couple of great books like Eric Helms' Muscle and Strength Nutrition Pyramid. And there's kind of like this pyramid of what the importance, right? The importance of when it comes to weight gain or weight loss, right? I mean, obviously, if you want to weight gain, you want to have more calories. If you want to lose it, you want to have less. But at the bottom of it is energy balance, right? Energy balance really is calories in, calories out. And of course, we can, there's something else that I'll touch on this as far as, because people will say, do calories matter? Like what type of calories? Absolutely. I mean, we talked about that. It matters in from a sense of, hey, if I eat a processed food, I'm going to absorb more of those calories because you know what, that process, the processing of the food has basically cut out, you know, what the digestive system has to do. So if I eat a sweet potato fry versus just a cooked sweet potato, it's going to be different, right? Same thing if I eat an orange versus I drink an orange juice, like different, right? Different absorption, but nonetheless, calories in, calories out, energy equation balance, you can't cheat it. Although there's a lot of underlying things that result in that. But what that means is it goes right back to what we were just talking about. And what we were just talking about is that at the end of the day, yes, if you eat less calories than you burn up, you're going to lose weight. But people overestimate the amount of exercise they do as far as burning calories and underestimate how many calories they eat. And we know at the bottom of the pyramid is energy balance, right? Number 2 on that equation is macronutrients. So this is our proteins, our carbs, and our fats, right? And once again, more and more studies show, keeping protein pretty steady. And then when it comes to carbs and fats, it's more about like what works for you and what can you do consistently over time. Some people like to eat less carbs, more fat. Some people like to eat more carbs and less fat. Me personally, I love carbs, right? There is no right or wrong here, right? It's just like what's right for you. From there, there's micronutrients. Now, we need to get micronutrients because, like I said, micronutrient deficiencies are going to drive all types of things from, low energy to dropping your immune system to diseases to you name it, right? And deficiencies can also drive hunger and all types of different things. But so micronutrients are important, which is why, whole unprocessed foods, eating whole unprocessed foods matter, and supplementing with things like, obviously I'm a big fan of Athletic Greens, also on it, like different supplements that we're deficient in. So that's important. From there, it goes to nutrient timing. And this is why, we say, hey, nutrient timing is not that important. It's certainly not that important when it comes to, I would say, consistency. If you're not consistent with your nutrition, it doesn't matter if you don't pre-workout, post-workout, right? But if you can't get, I would say, certain habits and behaviors down that are more important, you shouldn't worry about meal timing. And then at the top is like supplements. Like I said, supplements are just that. They're supplementation for your regular nutrition. Now, if you look at this pyramid, and we got energy balance, macronutrients, micronutrients, meal timing, supplements. Underlying all that is behavior and lifestyle, right? Notice how it always brings us back to this, right? It always brings us back to this. And although here we're talking about nutrition, guess what? Behavior and lifestyle, no matter what, this is, when it comes to sleep, guess what? Behavior and lifestyle, right? When it comes to stress, behavior and lifestyle. And knowing that those are the things that we got to change to affect everything else. So the reason why I wanted to bring this up today is because, hey, if you're working a 12-hour day, you got 3 kids, life is stressful, you're sleeping only a good 5 hours a night, and those aren't that great. Your nutrition is not on point, but you're like, hey, I'm ready to get in shape, so I'm hitting the gym 4 days a week. I'm doing another 2 to 3 high intensity workouts and this, that, and the other. That's too much. That might be too much stimulus, not enough recovery. You might not be matching those behaviors and lifestyle habits with what you actually need, right? And it keeps bringing me back into, why environment is so important, right? And for instance, I think I've done a podcast on this. Most of us will eat what we're served. That's environment, right? Bigger plate, guess what? You're going to eat it. So no matter how big the portion is, if you serve a small bag of popcorn, it's gone. You serve a big bag of popcorn, it's gone, right? If I don't know, if you were served I would say a Fiat Punto full of popcorn, you probably eat that too. We eat more. I just put a Instagram post up about how we eat more than we're multitasking. There's a study showing that when people were listening to even just the radio and they were eating, they ate 15% more. And now we got our phones, computers when we work. if you ever started snacking while watching TV or playing video games, notice that like, the nuts are gone, the popcorn's gone, whatever you're eating is gone, right? Because your attention is elsewhere, so your mind goes on autopilot, satiety cues don't kick in, and so on and so forth, right? And if you consistently eat, and this is like, we're hedonic in nature, but if you eat a bigger portion, after a while the bigger portion becomes normal, right? And we'll regularly overeat. And remember, we just talked about this, how we we're not good at estimating how much we eat, right? Even, and like I said, even I would say the things such as MyFitnessPal and like food packaging is up to 25% off or more, right? So remember, like now all of a sudden it's like, whoa, and I'm not trying to make a case for like, you're doomed. No, not at all, but it's just awareness around this, right? Put it this way, imagine that like, back in the day, like with your grandparents, what was normal for them? They'd eat the 4-ounce burger and the 7-ounce soft drink, but now it's like everything's bigger, right? Now it's like at least a 8-ounce, 10-ounce, 12-ounce, whatever it may be, right? Everything's become bigger. And science has shown that we just eat more calories, and a lot of it is our environment, right? Which is the foundation of habit. So when it comes to food, we've talked about this, that part of the problem, like I talked about Eric Helms' pyramid, right? About energy balance, macronutrients, micronutrients, meal timing, and then supplements. But how everything is underlyingly, behaviors and lifestyle. And then when we start understanding that a lot of the behaviors, right, our environment is the foundation of habit, is the foundation of behaviors, that means that we got to assess our environment. And one of the issues, and I would say the problems, is that people start, up at the top, right? So think, it's almost like the opposite of what you might expect. And I've mentioned this before, right? People start thinking about targeted calorie intake, right? So somebody comes in, their lifestyle behaviors aren't on point with what they want to achieve. Their behaviors are not matching their goals. And the first thing they look to is like, Luka, how many calories should I eat? Now, the thing is, they're not looking at their behaviors and mindfulness and awareness of what they're doing. They're going straight to like, give me the data of how many calories I should eat, which is a really simple thing to do. But, for most people, it's like, hey, multiply your body weight by 12. There's a lot of equations. That's just a simple one. Remember, no equation really is precise or will work. You just got to start somewhere. Multiply your body weight by 12. That's where you start, track it every 2 weeks to see which direction you're going, right? But we dug into that in a different podcast as well. But the whole point of this is that, like, if you look at the pyramid, here we go, we got another pyramid. But hey, these are like visuals are helpful here, right? Is think at the foundation of everything when it comes to not just, we're talking about nutrition, but we talked about these other factors that are really affecting transformation, right? Which are, like I said, sleep, stress, training stimulus, too much of it, right? Underestimating how much we eat, overestimating how much we burn, so on and so forth. Well, those are all parts of this pyramid if you really truly look at it. Because look, at the bottom is a supportive social environment. Like the knowledge, like I said, I started with this podcast by saying that we have more knowledge than we ever had, and yet more books, more data, more you could Google everything now. Although when you Google stuff, it's like, hey, which source is actually credible? But at the end of the day, we do have that information. But if you could have the information and keep putting yourself into social environments that aren't like supportive of your goals, and it's going to be very difficult to change. Very, very difficult to change. Having a basic physical activity program is important. But once again, there's the other side of the spectrum that we talked about, which is overtraining. Like, it's not even overtraining, it's under recovering, right? So being able to balance those out. Then you have like health-focused kitchen and grocery shopping. That is environment. That's massive. Like if you keep coming home and having foods that trigger you after a long day where you're stressed out, possibly emotional, and you have foods that are easily available to you that basically you can, as soon as you eat them, you're going to go down the spiral and eat more of them. And they're low in nutrient density but high in caloric density, right? Once again, that you're setting up your environment to be unsuccessful. Things like eating a variety of fresh, minimally processed foods, right? Just making those behaviors happen will for sure change the way you look, feel, and perform. Is that going to take you all the way to ripped and shredded to bits on a stage? Probably not. But then most people don't even want or need that, right? And we always talked about that kind of give and take. Like after those, so I'm going to go over those again, right? Supportive social environment, basic physical activity program, health-focused kitchen grocery shopping, eating a variety of fresh, minimally processed foods. And then I'd also add, quality sleep. Because remember, we just talked about that, right? Making sure you got quality sleep. Stress. And then the stress comes back to like, hey, who are you around? What's your work like? If you absolutely hate, I'll say what you do. But then, what type of books are you reading so that your perspective maybe changes around your work and the people you work with, and you become more positive versus maybe seeing things in a negative way. These are all environments. These are all basically environments that shape the behaviors and lifestyle that's at the bottom of the pyramid, right? Only then do you go to things like, progressive training regimens. So, as much as like I'm a coach and somebody that designs programs and trains athletes and clients and makes programs that are structured and organized to help somebody grow. For somebody that's just starting to do something, like, look, if they don't have any organization, but they're just 3-4 days a week going to Zumba and hiking a little bit and getting a workout in with their friends, man, you're winning. You're winning. Like that's. I mean, I'm fist bump, like I'm dapping you up right now because that's great. But then the next step is obviously getting something more structured and organized to help you keep improving, and that's based on science. Tailored portion sizes. When you start kind of going like, okay, I've changed my environments, I lost weight, I'm feeling better. Now I got to start looking into a little bit more, whether I'm actually tracking the calories, with something like a macro tracker or MyFitnessPal or something like that, or am I doing the hand-based portions that we teach that are precision nutrition-based, right? That's another route to go. But either way, you have to start manipulating and controlling how much you eat. Like your portion sizes for what the goal is you want to achieve. You want to build muscle, maybe it's bigger. If you want to lose weight, maybe they're smaller. And then things like nutrient timing, for instance. And then only at the top, is like improved goal-setting strategies, advanced nutrition and exercise plans. Advanced meaning that they're very, a lot more specific, both in your macros, your calories, when you eat, such like things like that. Like I said, balanced macronutrition, and then targeted calorie intake. Right, only at the top is like we get there, and I'm not saying that that's not like I said, one size doesn't fit all. So when we do nutrition coaching, like we're always looking at the person and asking a lot of questions and kind of doing coactive coaching, where we get to a place where, like I said, we're not telling people what to do, right? We're working with them, guiding them, supporting them, coaching them to their goals. So it's as the least amount of stress that we can have with the most result. I mean, it is essentially the minimal effective dose on that. So it's the opposite way of what most people expect, right? The base of the pyramid is what surrounds you, your social environment and culture, right? Your kitchen, your grocery habits, your day-to-day routines that we've talked about before, your people, right? Those are the foundation. I'm going to repeat those because this is very important. Your social environment and culture, your kitchen, your grocery habits, your day-to-day routine, your people, right? So in general, when it comes to engineering healthy eating or healthy anything else, fill in the blank, here's the golden rule. Make healthy behaviors convenient and easy, and make other behaviors less convenient. That's going to really, really shift your life, right? So I've mentioned this before. Things from using smaller plates and cups. If there's food you don't want to eat, avoid keeping it around. Having a fresh, healthy whole foods prepared and in plain sight. Stuff like parking your car further away if you do want to get more steps. Keeping your bike ready to go by the front door. Things like that. Having a meal delivery service. Making yourself a smoothie for a healthy snack. Having healthy snacks prepped for you. Also, because I talked about higher stress and not sleeping, is like, creating sleep rituals and, finding better environments for work or doing, mobility in the morning and having days for recovery. I think this is massively important. It's like structuring recovery days. Like we're doing recovery day now at Vigor, where my crew meets up and we're going to do everything from decompression hanging to to the ex-wife to doing mobility drills. And the ex-wife, by the way, is like a really heavy imagined roller that Donnie Thompson created. Cryo chamber, hypervolt rice guns, things of that nature, right? But like, it's scheduled. Have a scheduled massage, every week, every 2 weeks. Have a scheduled walk and hike, right? Once again, you're balancing out these things that like allow your body to actually make the adaptations that you want. Fat loss, muscle building, improved neurological performance, right? Things of that nature. So, you ask like why fitness is failing us, and I would say why fitness and nutrition is failing us, once again, is that we're not paying enough attention to recovery, right? Which is a lot of factors. Recovery is everything from improving sleep, reducing stress, improving nutrition, right? Having, I would say a lot of recovery is also being around the right people. Like if I'm around people and I'm smiling and laughing, I'm relaxed, right? If I'm around people that stress me out, that's, first of all, one, it stresses me out, which is not good. Two, that stress usually drives behaviors that take you away from your goals. Drinking, eating, over training. That for me, that was a thing of, you stress me out and I'm going to go train a lot of times or work a lot of times, like too much. But you have to recognize that, and with that said, you can assess and change those things based on, like I said, switching your environments, right? So with that said, I'm gonna click back into this right here. Everything's connected to energy, everything. And I'd even go beyond the physical energy, but nutrition, training, stress, sleep, activity, right? All of that stuff is energy in, energy out in some way or another. And, we have to manipulate that. And I would say a mistake that I see a lot of trainees, right? Because there's two sides of the coin. There's people that do have a lot of stress and a lot of things going on, but they need to actually do more activity and more training and manipulate the calories. But everybody, I would say majority of people need more recovery. But a mistake I see a lot of trainees and also coaches, make is not understanding the difference between training, which has a goal of creating an adaptation and improvement, and a demonstration, right? So once again, there's training, right, which creates an adaptation and improvement, and there's demonstration. I'll give you an example. Demonstration is like I'm doing my max deadlift. I'm demonstrating like my performance. I'm doing the highest box jump that I could, whatever. I'm going to, do my 100-meter sprint to get the best time. That's demonstrating my physical performance and capacity. Training is to create an adaptation so that I can get better and better and better. And too many people are demonstrating too much, right? Every workout is all out, right? Every time I'm jumping, and from a standpoint of somebody that used to live this way, because I was like, man, I'm putting in my full-on effort, which is important. But if I'm trying to create an adaptation through training, it's structured in a specific way because that gives me the stimulus, but also gives me the recovery, right? If you played a game every single day, by day, 2 weeks in, you're smashed. You can't perform at your best. You can't demonstrate at your best, right? So that understanding of, going in to crush yourself every single day, and doing everything, like there is no lower intensity training. There's no mobility. There's no, this, that, and the other. There's always go, 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 go. That's a mistake, right? Seek adaptation, not demonstration. I'm going to pause it for a second while I sip on my bang. Seek adaptation, not demonstration. And you could actually, this is obviously a training point, but I would say that you could carry this over, same thing with nutrition, right? Like seek adaptation, not demonstration. Like, hey, seek a positive change that's going to stick, and not like, man, to me, like doing a detox is demonstration. Okay, cool. Well, man, you did a water cut and you did this, and that, and you look leaner, but that's not the adaptation that you're looking for the long term, right? So once again, seek adaptation, not demonstration. And with that said, hopefully I brought some light into, why things are failing us based on, the research and data and the science and what you need to improve on. And it comes back to the same thing, that these simple things that we need to improve and just do it really well and do it consistently. And that you're winning as long as you're getting better, right? As long as it's a little more or a little better and it's sticking, you're winning. I'll leave you with this analogy that, like, I actually wrote an Instagram post on this, that, you know, if you're 2 to 3 miles away from your house and you got to get home, like, you could run, right? You could run, but if you start running hard, you'd get home faster. But in the meantime, you're probably going to, one, get sweaty, be uncomfortable. And hey, look, most people might not even make it. Most people will just stop running. Maybe will gas out and have to sit down, right? Some people might get injured, right? But most people will do very well just going at a regular pace and enjoy that walk home and be there in no time, right? Because they're enjoying the walk, they're going slow, they're not sweating, they're not crazy uncomfortable. And I would have you consider that nutrition is the same way, right? You can walk home where many people sprint and then they injure themselves and they have to stop. Or they get sweaty and uncomfortable and they don't like that, so they stop and they turn around and go back, right? Where there's an approach that you can take that's much more comfortable, and it's just like, you know, that saying, the best diet is the one that you don't know you're on, right? Because as soon as you feel like you're on a diet, you're waiting for it to stop. You're waiting for it to be over. It's not part of what you are, who you're becoming. And with that said, like, if you're walking home, it's going to be more natural, and, you know, you'll be halfway through seeing progress, seeing changes, feeling good about it, not being overly stressed. And, you know, with that said, saying that stress is such a big factor, think about adding nutrition that is stressful into your life, meaning too much to think about, overwhelm, you know, constantly having to track data and numbers and things of that nature. Once again, I'm not beating up, you know, counting calories, or because I think they're a great awareness tool. But once again, if that person is more stressed out because of this approach, you know, we've seen that is not taking people to where they want to go. I mean, data is showing us, reality is showing us that that's not true. So there's a different approach. So how do we get nutrition and fitness not to fail us? You know, hopefully that's brought some light and some tactical and actionable steps that you can use. Like I said, even if it's 1 or 2 and you're like, man, that makes sense, and you start doing and applying it, then absolutely, hopefully this will help you out. With that said, guys, love and appreciate you tuning in. You could be anywhere else, but you're listening to this, and I'm very grateful for that. I always want to let you know that, like I said, that matters a lot to me. Like, I do this because it's an extension of the coaching that I do at Vigor Ground. Also, you know, from the training, the fitness, the nutrition, to the business coaching to help other gym owners. And I really, really do appreciate it. With that said, too, I want to say, hey, look, if you love this podcast, you know, go and give it a review on iTunes, share it, spread the word. You know, I know that there's a lot of stuff that people shared where I would listen to it, and it really made an impact on me, and actually it made me change something in my life and took it in a different direction. And, you know, if it does that for you and you feel it can do it for somebody else, that's my main purpose on this. To be honest with you, like, I never even started this podcast to have sponsors, to have any of that. You know, I'm not even actively pursuing it, and hey, maybe I should, but it really was like, hey, how can I get, you know, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, you know, or more people listening to this, where it'll help them both, you know, people that are just trying to change their body, change their mind, change their life, and coaches helping others do that same thing. So I appreciate you. Go and leave a review, and I will see you in the next Vigor Life podcast. Peace.